American Canyon! Morning, everybody. How are we doing? How many of you are saying, I am doing great. I am excited about this conference. How many of you are in the, I would be, but I haven't yet achieved any caffeine? Anybody? Anybody? How many of you, like, you have it right next to you? You got the grande, summa cum laude, whatever it is today, all right? Okay. Now, I'm curious why you came to this session, all right? So here we've got this session about staff development, and as I say it, the back door to staff development, kids. And how many of you are classroom teachers? Classroom teachers, raise your hand. Okay. How many of you who are classroom teachers also have another role? You also, everybody. All right. How many of you are administrators? Okay. How many of you specifically work on staff development? Okay, good, good, good. Who am I leaving out, by the way, in the group? Higher ed. Higher ed? How many university folks do we have with us? All right, teacher training programs, things like this, certification programs, all right? You're representing the group, all good. All right, well, in starting things today, I should be social. My name is Rushton Hurley. Nice to meet you guys. I was a teacher, a high school teacher for many years of Japanese language. I also was a principal of a K-12 and then an online high school. And now I run a little nonprofit called Next Vista for Learning. I also do a lot of work with the Krause Center for Innovation at Foothill College. They run the Merit program, great crowd, wonderful people. And if you are curious about that kind of thing, feel free to corner me right after the presentation. I'm happy to talk to you more about it. So this particular session really has to do with the power to make things happen for your staff via what you do with students. So I'm going to describe a set of experiences I've had. Hopefully that these will be useful to you in some fashion. But in looking at this, first let me say, those of you on Twitter, actually the hashtag for the conference, is it FallQ13? FallQ. All right. And that's me up there, Rushton H. So feel free to tweet. Hopefully it'll be something good, and I'll try to live up to my end of that bargain. Now, when you think about professional development, you really have to stop and say, you know, what are we shooting to do? Because, okay, professional development is this important thing, fine. But what is it that it's supposed to do? I would say that one of the big pieces is that we figure out what's possible with whatever is available. That if you have a set of teachers who essentially say, what have we got, then what can we do? As opposed to, well, I can't do this because I don't have that. And you know, if only we had this, then we could, no, I mean, that is a waste of oxygen at that point. What we really need to be doing is saying, we can make great things happen with the kids no matter what we have. And, you know, if you're like, oh, not me, but no, there are teachers out there who teach next to, you know, dumps, and they don't have squat in their school, and they're doing amazing things with kids. And if you don't believe me, pick up this month's issue of Wired and read one of the great articles of all time. Now, what I want to see is I want to see teachers stop and say, this is something I can do. Now, getting them to that point is a process. And so I'm going to take you through some pieces of that process that I think are important. So there are several things teachers need to realize in order for the stage to be properly set, the ground to be prepared for what's going to happen. Now, let me start this way. How many of you could name at least one way that your school could improve? All right, if your hand is not up, I'm hoping you're not listening, because I'm hoping everybody has at least one way that they could improve their school, right? Now, second question, how many of you are so good at what you do that there's no way that you could improve? Anybody? No. And there's a reason for that. Momentito. Everything all right? All right. So, given that we all know that we can improve, given that we all know that there are things that can happen at our school, that changes something in how we think about what might be possible in the classroom. But the question becomes, how do we get them there, and how can students help make this happen? Because at one level, you look at this third question, how can we involve the students in improvement? That may sound like just a nice thing, like get all the stakeholders involved. I suspect that for a number of people on your staff, the answer to this question is the answer to whether you'll be able to make something good happen at your school in terms of professional development. So, which people are we talking about? So you have to stop and say, okay, well, where are our people? Where are our people? What are they thinking about? You know, how do they see their environment? Think about your teachers for a minute. Where are they? Because there's a number of different possibilities. One is that you've got a set of teachers that are already going great guns. They're experimenting with all kinds of things. Technology, not technology. I mean, they're just doing interesting stuff. How many of you would say, and I'm gonna kind of get into some percentages here. How many of you say that you have a good portion of your staff would be in this category? They're already experimenting and exploring and things like this. Now, obviously, the problem with what I just asked is that good portion is ill-defined, right? How many of you would say that at least half of the staff is in that category? Those of you with your hands up, that's fantastic. That's really fantastic. Matter of fact, you may have some teachers in the room who are like, hey, wait, maybe I can talk to you later. I've got a resume, something like that. Because that's a really interesting environment. How many of you would say, we've got some of those people, but it's probably not even 25% of the staff? All right, quite a few hands up as well. So that's going to be one end of our spectrum. People who are, it doesn't really matter what's going on. They're doing interesting stuff just because they figure that's a good way to go through life, and they're right. Now, here's this group. We've got a group that says, I'd like to try things out. I don't know how. They need some guidance. They need somebody to say, have you tried this? Let's try this together. Maybe this could be possible. How many of you would say that at least half your staff is in that category? Okay, quite a bunch. My thinking tends to be that a good half or more of all teachers tend to be in that category. That whatever that first, if you take everybody, whatever the percentages of that first group, it's fairly small. Maybe, let's say it's between 20 and 30. And then you get to these not sure how to get going, that's probably 50%, and then you got this crowd, right? Technology. Yeah, I've been around for a lot of different things that have come through. They come, they go. This internet thing is total fad. How many of you have some staff members like that, right? Bless their hearts. They eat up a lot of our attention, don't they? Right? And they have lots of interesting things to say, he said, with quotes around the word interesting. But that's an interesting crowd too. And it's an interesting crowd in part because often they are teachers who will defend the needs of kids that everybody else ignores. They will. You have a set of teachers who are really looking out for a set of kids who give us headaches, shall we say, right? And if that's where they are, all the more important that we somehow bring them into the process of saying, I can make some cool things happen in my classroom, because they want to. They want to. If the discussion is about something kind of writ large, let's improve the school, they may think, yeah. But if it's about, I know you've got a kid who desperately needs something different, can we make something happen there? Then now you have something different. And let's talk about what you do. So if we're thinking in terms of, all right, how do we move these things forward? Then I think what we need to do is stop and say, how do we get people into a process of being those who try? Especially if, going back, a bulk in some measurement of your staff is in that second group, then how do we get them into the first? So how do we move them forward? Well, there's a lot of different ways to approach that. I am going to suggest that there are several things that have to be out there for the teachers to be thinking about as we move into having kids be a part of the process. The first is this. Powerful tools have a role to play. Now, when I say that, what I mean is that technology, while helpful, technology is not going to change a teacher from being, say, a bad teacher to a good teacher. That's not what technology is going to do. Technology may well allow a good teacher to make some great things happen in the classroom, but it won't change a bad teacher into a good teacher. What you want is to say, if I had this or this or this, I could make this happen. Okay, that's the start. And then how do we get them into the point where they're looking for those pieces, or they're wanting to go from being aware of what's possible to actually trying it out? Now, this is a piece as well. In part, I just like the word onerous, all right? It's kind of a cool word. Right? Ornery is also cool. I could have got that up there. But when we think about what's new, a lot of teachers stop and say, okay, this is going to be a pain. Right? It's something else. It's something more. Something else to kind of occupy my time, whatever. But not necessarily. And maybe getting them there is a function of persuading them that there's something to be gained by adopting something different. A little extra work on the front end will mean time saved going forward. That's possible as well. Now, this is a barrier to getting a lot of teachers going, is they think they need to know tons and tons and tons, right? Now, how many of you, think for a minute, how many of you know somebody on your staff that everybody would point to and say, that's the guru, that's the technology guru on the staff. You know that person, you can kind of identify that person. How many of you are the tech guru on the staff, right? And you know, actually, that being the tech guru is not nearly, what people think it is. It really means that, if something goes wrong with the machine, you're like, okay, all right, let's turn it off, all right, wait a minute, all right. Let's turn it back on. Is it fixed? You're a guru, that kind of thing, right? Unplug and plug. There's a lot of different ways to fix a computer. But the idea of knowing tons is a bit of a, it's a bit of a red herring out there, right? Because when teachers think, okay, I need to know more, I need to know more, I need to be trained, I need to do this, they're already where they need to be, which is in a place where they're asking good questions. Because even if you know everything there is to know about educational technology right now, you really are the guru. You know everything right now. 5 minutes from now, you're behind. And if that's the case, then how do we respond? Is it we throw up our hands? Well, we can't handle this. No. What it means is we stop and we concentrate on the stuff that fascinates us and the stuff that we can use, and we kind of build out a set of tools and possibilities related to what already interests us. Now, getting those people there is also a part of the process, but they're not going to get there without this last piece. We have, I am sure I am one of dozens of presenters that will make this point over the course of the conference, but failure has been stigmatized, right? Oh, you fail. When, in fact, if failure isn't part of a process, then you never push yourself to learn anything interesting, do you? You see this from the kids. If they get an F and don't stop and say, I'm going to do better the next time, they're in trouble. Similarly, as teachers, if we don't stop and look at the things we do and say, we could do this better, then we're holding back from points that might be quite amazing. All right, so let's look at this way. Gee, Rushton, your slides just changed. Yes, they did. All right. So, Italy. Now, I got a call a few years ago from a school that said we'd like you to work with our staff. I said, well, I'd be happy to work with your staff. Where's your school? Milan, Italy. I think I could work with you. Right. So I went. This was in 2011. I went there. I worked with their staff. It was great. Wonderful set of people, fascinating teachers. I mean, really, really interesting folks. It was interesting, like when we started, this was the thing that really stood out, right? When we started the program, the teachers walked in and all sat in the front. I'm thrown off. I'm like, whoa, what just happened, right? Because, in every other school I've ever been to, they're like way in the back, he's not going to see me, right? But they're just right there. So we spent a couple of days working on all kinds of stuff. They got excited about this and like, oh yes, this is going to be great, blah, blah, blah. So then I left. Some of the teachers did some great stuff. A lot of them didn't leap into doing some different things, but at least we're a little more aware. Maybe that's what a 1 or 2 day PD experience is about. But they contacted me and said, we want to bring you back next year. I said, well, I'd be happy to. But we want you to present to students. Now, the next part of this session is really about explaining what that was and what it was designed to do, and I think what got accomplished. Now, first of all, I should explain what we're looking at. The Collegio San Carlo, sorry about that, of Milan, Italy, is right across the street from the church that houses the painting, The Last Supper, which is pretty cool. If you go to Milan, make sure like weeks and weeks beforehand, you like set it up to go visit because you can't get in. It's just packed. All right, and you got to have a ticket. Then down here, here's like a part of the school, like even though it's in the city and everything's running around, they've got this kind of interior that's quite cool. And over there on the right is probably the best cup of hot chocolate I've ever had in my life. I think what happened was the guy just took like a really nice chocolate bar and just melted it into a cup and like, here, oh man, so like it was that kind of thing, right? So wonderful place, but every school has got interesting people. Every school has got kids that are waiting to do something really interesting as a part of their experiences at school. Nobody essentially wants to go to school for 12 years and be like, oh, good, I'm gone. That's not what they want. What they want is to be at school saying, I love being here. And in fact, kids by and large do like being at school. They do. Now, if I were to ask you, and let's talk about, say, the 3rd to 12th grade crowd for a minute. What's the #1 adjective those kids would use to describe school? Boring, 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 boring. A couple of 1st and 2nd grade teachers going, wonderful, exciting. I don't know what you're talking about right now. Now, the issue is not that school is boring, because it's not. I mean, I'm not just like, school is not boring. That's not what I mean. It's not boring to them. In fact, they like school. They like seeing their friends. They like being around caring adults, perhaps, who don't freak out when things go wrong. I mean, all kinds of reasons are out there why they like being at school. But boring is a word that they use in place of another word. And that word, I believe, is predictable. They find school predictable. They find that when they step into the classroom that the teacher, no matter how good the teacher is, they kind of know what's coming up. Okay, we're going to do 5 minutes of this and 10 minutes of that, blah, 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 right? And so they kind of move into a lower gear. We have to keep them guessing. One of the great powers of technology to make wonderful things happen in the school is to break predictability, to give kids that chance to go, oh. Matter of fact, I think you can judge the effectiveness of classrooms often by just counting up the number of times students go, whoa, right, in class. I think that's very, very powerful. Now, getting kids to that point means that teachers have to try stuff out, but how do you get that to happen? Well, essentially, I spent a day at Colegio San Carlo working with students, bringing them in. I did a series of exercises called Creativity and Excellence. And so they'd bring in like 50, 60 kids to the library. They'd sit down and say, okay, so we're doing this now, we do this, we try that. I'm going to take you through a few of the things that we did in order to try to explain what they were trying to accomplish. And then if you're convinced that that's a good idea, how you can go do this at your school. This is my goal for the next few minutes. Now, one of the things I asked the kids to do was to say, tell me about the future. Tell me about what the world's going to look like in 5 to 10 years. There's one. People will hopefully recognize what our indifference is doing, right, to our own planet and to our own society. That's pretty cool. That's a cool thought. Other kids. People will be more and more independent with no fear of sharing ideas. As in, right now, people have a fear of sharing ideas. Is this what this kid meant? I think so. Someone will discover a way not to die. Here's an interesting thought, isn't it? Now, that may seem, like a religious question at some level, but really what it is if medical science extends to the point where any given piece of who you are, biologically speaking, can be recreated, through stem cell, kind of cloning technology. If that's possible, could we reach a point where biologically people don't just kind of expire? I mean, you might fall off a cliff, you might do something weird to yourself, but on the other hand, you don't just die. And then people would maybe decide, okay, my time is up. Now, I don't say that's good, I don't say that's bad, right? It's just possible. Now, a lot of those ideas were carried in a program some years ago by a guy named Gentry Lee, right, who's an author and a futurist. And I love that the kids were kind of looking at these possibilities. But let me say that in picking out these 3 pieces of what we were doing, I didn't pull up a number of things that the kids said, such as there will be more conflict, there will be a breakdown. And there were a lot of kind of dark visions of the future as well. But essentially, they're thinking. So point being that they've got a lot of interesting ideas and they're ready to share them. The question is, are we giving them a vehicle for doing so? So if you don't believe me, all right, about their having interesting ideas, and I suspect you do, but still, take a look at these 2 pictures. So we got 2 pictures up here. I talk about these 2 pictures a lot because this particular activity was one that kind of floored me in terms of how the students kind of work with their world. So I'm going to take a minute, and what I want you to do is with anyone kind of close by, I'm hoping you're not sitting so far from other people that you're like, ooh, there's nobody here, right? But with anybody close by, I want you to come up with a story that combines the picture on the left with the picture on the right. Totally up to you. Come up with a story. Go. So in about 30 seconds, I'm going to ask for people to actually share some of the stories that you came up with. All right. So decide together, you know, like which one of you is willing to share, that kind of stuff. We're going to listen to a couple of these. Are we ready? So, I'd love to hear some of your ideas. What do you see as maybe a possible story that combines the picture on the left with the picture on the right? So let's start over here.
Okay, so the guy in the center of the train.
The one looking out, right?
Looking at, we call him Jack Fukuyama.
Jack Fukuyama, okay.
Okay, so he is on the bullet train. He's been pushed in. He's going to be on this train for an hour and a half going to wherever his destination is.
Uh-huh.
All these people are around him. He's got no space whatsoever. So he transports himself to this peaceful place where he is alone and he can commune with nature and find peace and actually just feel free of all the hubbub. Because if he doesn't, he is going to go postal on that train and kill everybody.
So this is not merely, you know, like a nice thing for him. It's a safety valve for everybody else.
It's his coping mechanism so he doesn't go postal.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And by the way, awesome teacher voice as well. Great stuff. All right, cool. Let's get another story. Yeah.
So immediately I thought of the Hunger Games.
The Hunger Games. Okay, got it.
All of these people are on the bullet train to meet their death in this
They're going somewhere to participate in a competition that will result in many of them expiring.
or whatever we're on.
Uh-huh.
Reincarnation. So they're going from their school or their work and now headed into certain death.
Okay. So essentially, you're using these two to imagine, you know, that experience with that piece of literature and seeing that as a possibility there. Interesting. Cool, cool, cool. Next. All right. Another story. Yes, right here.
I would share Eric's story that has to do with geophysics. So Tokyo's on an island, and it's getting way too weighed down on one side where all the people are. So they're loading all these people onto a train to the other side of the island so that the whole island will tip this way so that we actually change the balance.
It's a story about balance, right? There's so many people in Tokyo that the island is kind of doing this, and if we just ship them off over to this other place, they'll be okay. I love it. I love it. Do you teach math or science? All right? He said, oh, wait. Okay, cool. Now, first of all, give those people a hand. Yay, sharing a story. Awesome. Yeah, right. There's something fun about doing this, right? There's something fun about hearing the ideas of the people next to you. Often when you do something like this with a staff, you'll see staff members looking at each other saying, I had no idea that you were thinking, along those lines. You have this kind of quirky personality or humor or whatever. That's healthy. I see that as healthy. Now, when I did this with the students in Italy, they came up with a lot of good stuff as well. Right? So they were saying things like, oh, that's a magic train. And lots of people zero in on that guy in the middle. Because he's just got that look of, right? And he says, so it's a magic train. It'll take you wherever you want to go. And he wants to go there because that's where he grew up. Interesting thought, and very similar to the one that you mentioned a minute ago. Shortly after lunch, I'm working with another group of 50 or so that have come in, and I've got them in groups of 5 or 6. I said, all right, I'd like to hear your stories. And so this one kid, kind of in the back, raises his hand. His table's right over there. I said, yeah, what's your story? So this kid stands up, and he says this. You see the picture on the left? That's the present. And the picture on the right, that's the past. And in the past, they dreamed of being able to travel on things like trains. But in the present, they dream of the peace and simplicity of the past. And my response was something along the lines of, that's so cool! That's fantastic! Wow! Awesome! Who else? Nobody, right? And it was one of those moments where I was like, wow! That was really, just wow. So later in the day, it gets better. Later in the day, I'm presenting to the teachers, telling them what I've been doing with their students all day. And I tell them, I take them through the same exercise, and then I tell them this story about the past and the present. And in so doing, that staff erupted in applause to celebrate the creativity of their students. And at that moment, my thought was, wow, when's the last time that happened at the school where I last taught? Can't think of it. And I began to wonder, have we, in our system, in our focus on these tests and blah, 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 and all this other stuff, are we so into the right answer that we're depriving ourselves of some great answers? And if that's the case, because for me, it wasn't simply like that may be the case. I think it is the case. I think we move kids into this kind of thinking about what their job is in the classroom. And by saying this can't be a part of it, or we don't have time for this, or whatever it may be, we're depriving ourselves of those moments where what we would do at the end of the school day would be to hurry home. I got to tell you what this kid came up with. This was fantastic. Those are the moments we need. But those aren't going to happen because we verify that someone has the right answer. They're going to happen because we've given kids enough creative expression in the classroom to be able to share something along those lines. Now, once kids start doing that, they start thinking of each other in interesting ways. That changes the environment in the classroom. So now we're kind of moving things in a new direction if we're getting staff to take part. Another thing that I did with the students was I said, all right, I want to show you a video. And the video is about a young woman from a group called Project Amigo in Colima. You're like, where's Colima? Colima, Mexico, right there, right? A little town north of the city of Colima. And it's about her. So this particular organization was founded so that kids who in terms of material, they don't have squat, right? Poor materially. Rich in terms of being wildly cool, interesting, and wonderful people, right? But in terms of what they have materially, nothing, right? And so this organization essentially says, okay, let's set up a structure where we're supporting these kids in their education. Not only are we covering the family's expenses to help send the kid to school, but if the kids keep up their grades, and if they come to homework help every week and participate in the program, then they can continue to be sponsored, perhaps even through graduate school. This program has actually put a couple of people through, like, medical school and stuff. It's a fantastic program. So they help lots and lots of elementary kids and, some secondary kids and, a number of college kids and then a few graduates. So it's a wonderful program. Now, this video is one I showed them. Now, the video's in Spanish. Now, yes, if you speak Italian, then Spanish is not, it's not like us trying to suddenly handle Russian, right? But on the other hand, the thing about the video is that when it starts going, she's just talking about her goals. What are these things that I hope for? What am I doing? And she introduces kind of the setting that she's in. She introduces her home and her family. And so she says, I live with my mom and my dad. She's giving her mom a big hug, and this is our home. And she says in it, and I think our home is beautiful. Now, the video is showing the home, and what you're seeing is a dirt floor and probably cast aside metal as the roof, and some of the light that they're getting is pretty much coming through the holes in the walls. But her comment is that my home is beautiful. And she's excited about possibilities for a future. Now, I played that for the kids, and their response to the video was, at first, things like, wow, we're really lucky to have what we have. Followed by, she seems to be really happy. So, there's some larger questions in there that are designed mostly to get the kids to stop and say, it ain't about stuff. Now, we all know that. We can tell kids that. What's going to make you happy is not stuff. And yet, as teachers, do we or don't we have the stuff we need? Yeah, I know there's stuff we need. But is that a realization? Is it a barrier? What is it? Okay. So what is all this designed to do? Well, I wanted the kids to look at challenges. I wanted them to look at themselves and say, what are our challenges? How do I respond to challenges? And I asked them, when you have an assignment, a homework assignment, do you just kind of get to the end of it and think, thank goodness, I'm done? Or do you look at it at that point and stop and say, I wonder how I can make this better? A lot of what I do when I work with students, with teachers, is try to just think in terms of those two questions. Can we go from, am I done yet, to how can I make it better? Now, if this kind of thing is going to happen, then you have to stop and say, what kinds of things do we see that make that possible? Well, you might say, why am I showing this? This was actually put together by a kid. This is a piece of art that was put together by a kid for a scholarship contest. Now, the requirement was that they just create a piece of art using certain kinds of software and share it with a group, and gets discussed and that kind of thing. He included in the submission a 13-page paper that he wrote. That was not required. He just wrote it. Now, I don't know about you, but my experience with kids is that if asked to write a 13-page paper, many of them would go into a deep depression, right? No, that kind of thing, right? But he just put it together. Why? Because he wanted to share what he'd done. My point in all of this is that kids are interested to do cool and fascinating things, as long as teachers give them the avenue to do so. Which brings us back to this question again. Okay, well, if this is the back door, students are the back door to great professional development, what's the point? The point is this. In getting kids to see possibilities for their future with each other via their own kind of thinking about who they are in terms of their challenges, if they're into the idea that technology can be an expression of that in some fashion, now they walk back into the classroom ready to do this stuff. We sometimes pretend that because kids have access to all kinds of technology at home, they're going to walk into school and they're going to advocate for it in school. By and large, they don't. They've been taught, and we as a system have done it to them, that they come in, they shut up, and they sit down. Turn everything off. And that's kind of sad, right? Because what would be cool is if they come in and say, you know, here's one way we could work with this. Would you allow me to do this instead? Hey, I understand that there are these tools that allow making videos to be a really easy thing. Instead of writing this paper, could I do this? I'm not saying don't write. What I'm saying is, are we giving kids opportunities to do things in different ways? When does a teacher become comfortable giving kids choices? I think it happens in two ways. First, they need to understand that there are interesting possibilities out there, and then they need the push. They need the push essentially that says, do this. Now, that doesn't so effectively come from the top. Everyone will do this. All right, so everybody gives it a certain amount of lip service, whatever. But if kids are advocating for it in the classroom, now you've got a different environment. So, how do we work with this? How can we make this happen? Pieces of advice, suggestions for you. A creativity team. Imagine what I just described, a presentation done for students, getting them to be those who will advocate for something. If you're taking them through creativity exercises, which gets them out of the social dynamics that keep them from suddenly waiting for somebody else to do something, right? What do you mean by that? Remember what I was talking about a minute ago with the right answer and a great answer? What happens in class when we ask for the right answer is that most of the class will stop and wait for the kids who normally get the right answer to provide the answer so that we can all move on. Oh, there's an exciting environment. But it's natural, it's totally, and it happens all the time. But that's not that interesting. Asking kids, hey, what do you see in this? How can you connect this to what we've learned before? This isn't just talking about your feelings. What this is trying to get kids to creatively explain connections that may not have been explicitly put in front of them before. They can do it. But they have to be into the idea that creativity is a welcome piece of the environment. So, get some people from your staff together and say, okay, if we were going to put kids through a creativity and excellence session, what kinds of things would we ask them to do? What kinds of questions would we ask them to answer? What would we allow them to exhibit that may not be normally a part of what we do in class? Now, students can be involved in creating this atmosphere as well. What's cool in learning at your school? I want to take a moment with the person that you talked to a minute ago, turn and just say one thing that's really quite cool related to learning at your school. Go. All right, I'm going to ask for a few share-outs in just a minute as well, so be ready. What we got? What do we have that we can kind of toss out to the room? Something cool in learning that's happening at your school? Anybody? Cool.
That can go too far sometimes, but within the classroom, we've got different viewpoints.
So the idea that we're getting new voices, I'm going to come back to that in just a second. All right, and what do we have here?
I was going to say in an elementary setting.
Elementary,
Projects that involve cross-class work, sharing out to the larger community, whether it be the school or the parent community.
Projects that involve sharing, that the kids are sharing not just within their classrooms, but with other classes and maybe outside the campus as well. Parent groups, community groups, things like this. Telling the stories of the school. Awesome. All right. Anything else? Right here.
I want to share something that's not really technology oriented, but we're doing a lot of flexible furniture in a couple of classrooms, allowing kids to figure out how they want the classroom set up for that day's activities.
So the kids actually have a voice in how the classroom itself will be physically set up given what they're about to do.
Exactly.
See, very interesting, right? Now, some of this has to do with technology, some of it doesn't. Obviously, if you're telling your community about the things that are happening in your school, there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can put kids on stage, they can, kind of do a thing and tell about it, and that's great, but that will only hit the people who can show up and who are paying attention, as opposed to, say, doing that and making sure you've got a video that tells the story as well, which you can then send out to people, and they'll only click play when they're ready to watch it, so you've got a better audience at that point. There's a lot of different ways to do that, yeah? When we talk about setting up the environment, giving kids that kind of choice is giving them a message about what's possible in their setting, that the teachers, the staff, the administration actually is interested in what students think about how things will move forward at the school. That's big. As for the voices, one of the great things about technology is exactly what you said. Interestingly enough, and it happened actually in this room moments ago, I asked you to share some ideas with each other. People sharing ideas. I asked who has something to share with the group. We had to wait a moment. Naturally enough, totally fine. It's one thing to turn to somebody next to you and say something. It's another thing to suddenly say to the rest of the room, here's my idea. And for a lot of kids, when you say, every teacher does this. All right, guys, we're going to discuss this. And in every classroom where that happens, pretty much, there are kids who are like, not me. I'm not involved. You have your little discussion, go right ahead. Why? Because maybe they're shy, right? So their voices aren't being heard that way. Maybe what happens is when they speak up in class, there's this kid next to them that interrupts, and that's just infuriating, and they don't want to deal with that. There's any number of reasons why kids may not be participating, right? But then you allow for kids to toss ideas into a chat, for example. Today's Meet, it takes you all of 20 seconds to create a chat room that you can get in front of people, todaysmeet.com, great tool. So things like that, are out there, and suddenly, wow, this person has plenty of things to share. Does this mean stop having face-to-face discussions? Of course not. But you can have kids participate in new ways. The technology is helping make that happen. Of course, once you open that up, it's harder. And for a lot of teachers, they're quite comfortable with the idea that they're really only getting answers from these three people, but, they're helping everybody else, right? So it's all good. No. We're not fostering the kind of creativity that's possible when we limit things that way. So, what if, along the lines of what we're talking about here, where students are the ones actually deciding what the environment will look like, you've got a student innovation group. What if that group of students is there in order to learn, to talk with each other, what's the cool stuff that's been happening in your classes, in order to be able to take the really good ideas and to tell those stories, and to do it in such a way that they can get it out to the community, because if you're telling your community about it, like the lady was talking about here, now you are preparing the possibility that people who would be ready to support the school will now do it because they actually have the story that connects them to the action of how much do you need? Can we come by and visit in order to speak to your kids? Do you want that kind of thing? There are a lot of people out there ready to support the school as long as the school isn't simply saying, we're a school, help us. That's just not interesting. But if your school is a school where something interesting is happening, then that becomes the story that allows people to support what you're doing in order to make more interesting things happen. Now, the interesting things happen because teachers decide, I'll try this. Why do they decide to try it? Perhaps because the kids are motivated to step in the classroom and clamor for more opportunities. That's what I mean by the back door. Now, I'm going to talk about several things that I think we can celebrate as a part of this process. My little nonprofit, Next Vista for Learning at nextvista.org, saving the world from ignorance, one creative video at a time. Thank you very much. Right? Free to use, free to contribute to, free to download from. We run these contests, and we ask kids to say, all right, give us your idea about how to creatively explain something one might encounter in school. And here is one that did real well in a recent contest we did, and I want to show it to you right now. Here we go.
Hello? What? A vocabulary mystery? I'm on my way.
What does vacant even mean?
Without understanding vacant, it just doesn't make sense. There are clues you need to look for to figure out the meaning of a word. Use context clues. Let's figure out the meaning of the word Connie.
Clue was trick. It tells us the students were tricky. Connie means tricky.
Time to keep reading to see what a word means.
Kilowatts are carnivores. I wonder what a carnivore is.
Keep reading.
Carnivores are animals that eat meat.
Now let's look at a picture to figure out a word.
The kids were elated when they got to Disney World. They looked pretty happy. So elated must mean happy.
Now let's break apart words to figure out what they mean.
I see the word toothache in the compound word. Toothache. I know it means a tooth that has an ache.
Honorable. I know able means given, and honor means respect. Honorable means given respect.
So, all we need to do is look for clues? The sentence tells us that the neighbors moved away. That has to be a clue. If the neighbors moved away, the house would be empty. Vacant means empty. I guess solving vocabulary mysteries isn't so hard after all.
Look for clues.
Do you know your vocabulary? Vocabulary, vocabulary. Do you know your vocabulary? It's all around the text. There are prefixes and suffixes, context clues and compound words. But never forget your pictures. That's just what might help you.
If you like that, give them a hand, yeah? Fun stuff. Why do I show it? Because we want to celebrate cool things that happen in class. Often what we do in the staff room, for example, is if anybody's talking about something great that happened in class, we treat that as, oh, that person's bragging. Please. Right? How are we going to spread cool ideas around the staff if it's somehow like not cool to talk about good things that happen? We have to be ready to celebrate those moments. And if you have something like this, hey, let's show this in the staff meeting. It's 2 minutes of your time, but it sets it out there. We're doing interesting things. What's interesting in your class? We want to be able to tell about the interesting things that are happening in every class on campus. What's happening in your class? Now, understand something. I know that for some teachers that would be a threatening idea. Well, because maybe they aren't doing all that interesting stuff most of the time. However, I would contend that there are cool things happening on class, there are cool things happening on campus every day at your school. And yet, if people aren't really talking about them, you may not even know. You may not even know that something wonderful is happening two rooms down. I would actually say that every member of your staff, everyone, does something cool at least once a year, perhaps by accident, but it happens, right? And if so, let's get that out there. Let's make sure that we're all attaching ourselves to something interesting, which usually means leaving the bounds of the predictable. Let's celebrate innovation. You might say, I don't know, that picture doesn't suggest to me that there's a lot of innovation going on. Let me describe something. How many of you guys are at schools that regularly use Google Apps? You're either a Google Apps school or you use the Google tools a lot. A ton of you, right? And those are just the people who are listening. So, if that's the case, how are we using it? Are we simply replacing what we did with Microsoft Office? There's plenty of good tools in Microsoft Office, but why would we switch over? Well, when you look at Google Drive, you look at this very, very amazing piece of it which says you can collaborate on documents. Okay, that can be good for writing, absolutely. What else can we do with it? Check this idea out. What if every day there was a document, right? And the document were the notes for the unit. And everybody in the class has access to that document. And each day there are two students whose job it is to take the notes. And one person's the primary note taker, another person's the secondary note taker. Everybody else is supposed to just listen. They can kind of take their own notes if they want. Their idea is to listen. You say, well, why are you talking about this? Because if you haven't looked at kids' notes, why do so many kids do bad in school? In part because they take atrocious notes. Have you ever looked at kids' notebooks and thought, this kind of thing? Because who taught them? Who taught them to take notes? Unless they're in an Avid program or something, nobody actually explains that. Are they just supposed to intuit it? Oh, this is how I take a good note. Imagine what's happening in class. I'm teaching you about, elasticity in economics, whatever it may be, and I'm explaining this, and you're like, huh? All right, and so you write down a word that you think is important. You're not sure if you spelled it right, but, okay, what was it about again? And you're not really sure, but now there's a new word, so you're like, huh. So you write that word down, and you're catching some of the definition, so you pull that. There's some commentary going on, but you're trying to finish off that sentence. And then, so you finish off the sentence, you look up, we're actually at a new term now. Why do kids do badly in school if they're only hearing like 1/3 of what the teacher says because they're busy taking bad notes? That may explain it, might it not, right? Which means that if kids are freed up not to take the notes, maybe that would help. What? But then they wouldn't. No. What I'm saying is move this around. Have different kids do this all the time. And at the end of class, the last 10 minutes of class, maybe what you do is you say, all right, kids, let's put the notes up on the screen. Everybody take a look. Are there really important things that we covered that aren't reflected in these notes? Let's fix them. So you're actually taking time to review the main points of the class, and everyone is getting a sense of what the things were that were supposed to be important enough to take notes on, such that when it's their turn, maybe they'll help doing it as well. And if you don't do a good job taking the notes, no worries, because everybody else behind you. You got the secondary person behind you, and everybody else is going to help when you do the review. That's a different way to approach notes. But we have the technology to do that now, don't we? Now, I understand not every classroom would be set up for that, but you really only need a couple of computers. Celebrate collaboration. Identify these things when they happen at your school and do something interesting. How many of you have heard of Club Academia? All right? A handful. Everybody else, check this out. All right? Club Academia was started by a group of students at Gunn High School and Palo Alto High School in Palo Alto. And what they did was they essentially said, these Khan Academy videos, they're boring. All right? So, big news there. All right? Are they helpful? Yes. In certain contexts, if you don't have misconceptions about the underlying concepts covered, fair enough. But what they did was they said, we want to make videos, screencasting videos, that are specific to what happens in our class. But they didn't say to the teacher, make them for us. They said, what if we have somebody who's specifically, their job in class, the student, their job is to sit down and to create the screencast. So that's a special kind of TA that the student is in the classroom. They're a part of this club where the whole point is to create these really interesting educational screencasts that are tied to what's happening in the classroom. And the kids themselves actually will sit down with the teachers, show them what they've done, and talk through the idea together. Did I capture this properly? Did we get all the pieces? What extra work is the teacher having to do? Review a video, talk about a few ideas. And suddenly there is all this extra stuff out there to help the kids learn. That's different. That's using digital media technologies in a way that allow us to get to kids who haven't had many avenues for coming at their work more effectively. And we can do it now. We can do it. It's an exciting time. Now, I want to finish up this way. Stay in touch with me. I welcome your doing so. There's my email address up there. I answer every email I get eventually, right? Under it is my little nonprofit attempt to save the world. That's a video library. We've got over 1,100, 1,200 videos or so in it that have been submitted by teachers and students around the world. Under that's my Twitter handle. If you are into service, that's my online Rotary Club. You're like, wow, I never thought I could join a service club. Well, if it's online and you can do it any time of week, there you go. So Instagram, I was a little late to Instagram, so I'm at Rushton was taken at Instagram, all right? Under that, resources. Tons of free resources that I've been assembling for years, and not just the links, a little comment about what I think is valuable about them. And then under that, newsletter. I send out a newsletter once a month. It contains like free cool tools I've run across and things that I think are inspiring and videos we've added to the library and that I've seen, things like that. If you don't like it, you can always click unsubscribe, no worries. And then down at the bottom, these slides. So if you think that the stuff that I presented might be helpful in trying to build something at your campus where you're getting kids to say, we think we can make great things happen. We see that. We see ourselves in new ways. We see our challenges in more creative ways. All of these pieces. If you think you can put something like that together and this will help, do it. Do it. And let me know. Stay in touch with me. I'm happy to share ideas because that's what I think is cool and fun. So I hope that in looking at this, you stop and you say, you know, this could help. Now, I'm doing a session tomorrow morning called How to Inspire Your Staff with Technology, Inspiring Your Staff with Technology. It's kind of a follow-on to this, that treats it more, from the perspective of teachers and teacher leaders and administrators working together on these ideas. But I finish the newsletter every month the same way, and I want to finish this session with it now. May you inspire and be inspired daily. Thank you so much for coming to the session this morning. If you have questions, feel free to come on up.